Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're jumping into something difficult but really important, looking at work from a peace researcher.
Yeah, it's quite a paradox we're looking at.
Exactly. Billions spent on rings, flowers, love songs, celebrating relationships.
Yeah.
Yet how do some men end up with this deep aversion, sometimes even outright hatred for women?
And the researcher gives it a specific name, misogynization. It's not just general dislike. They define it as a psychological process.
Okay.
It's where a man takes negative personal experiences, and crucially, these often have nothing directly to do with women, and then sort of generalizes that anger onto all women, irrationally.
Right, so it's like finding a scapegoat, but a universal one for these really personal, maybe unprocessed frustrations.
Precisely.
And what really struck me is the author's background. They're not just looking at individual psychology, they're peace researchers. That brings a whole different perspective, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. And their why is really compelling. The data, the hard statistics, show that greater gender equality makes a country, more peaceful and happier and wealthier.
You can actually see that.
Yeah, you look at things like the Global Peace Index, the World Happiness Report, compare them with the Global Gender Gap Report. The correlation is pretty undeniable. When women thrive, the whole country does better.
Wow. That raises the stakes quite a bit. This isn't just about personal well-being, then. It's touching on global stability.
Exactly.
So our goal here, our mission for this deep dive, is to kind of unpack the many experiences that can feed into this process, hopefully encouraging some self-reflection for men listening.
And for women to maybe see the patterns, too. But we have to be crystal clear up front. Right?
Absolutely critical. Women are not the cause.
Yeah.
They become the target.
Yeah.
This sort of lightning rod for anger that starts somewhere else entirely.
So let's get into that core mechanism first, that irrational generalization moment. The source uses a pretty vivid analogy.
Ah, the Brian and Jimmy story. Let's unpack that.
Okay, so imagine this guy, Brian. He's an adult, maybe in a supermarket queue, getting really angry because the person ahead, a man with red hair, is holding things up.
Okay.
And Brian just snaps. He actually assaults the guy. Later, the police ask him why, and he says, "I hate all redheads. This kid, Jimmy, a redhead, bullied me constantly in school, even stole my girlfriend."
Right, so the poor guy in the supermarket, totally innocent.
Completely innocent. He gets the full force of anger that Brian should theoretically still feel towards Jimmy, the bully from years ago, or maybe towards his own younger self for not processing it.
And that's misogynization.
That's the mechanism, exactly. Projecting old, unprocessed hurt onto innocent people now, and then generalizing it to that whole group, in this case, women. The researcher stresses that healing starts with courage. Men need the courage to look back at their own lives, their own biographies, and admit where maybe things went wrong, where judgments became irrational.
Okay, so if projection is the how, we need to look at the why. Where do the building blocks for that emotional instability come from?
The research points really strongly towards early life, right? Attachment issues.
Yeah, it goes right back to the foundational stuff. Bowlby, Ainsworth, their work on secure versus insecure attachment.
How does that play out?
Well, secure attachment, consistent care, tenderness, responsiveness from a caregiver build empathy, and crucially, self-confidence.
The feeling of, I'm okay, even on my own.
That's the bedrock. I am okay, even without a woman. But insecure attachment? That's where problems can start. It undermines that self-confidence, creates these vague fears, maybe antisocial tendencies. It makes a man really vulnerable to outside ideas about masculinity, about partners.
And it impacts empathy, too.
Big time. Without that secure base, it's harder to recognize or even, feel the systemic disadvantages women often face. The empathy just isn't there.
And often tied up with that, sadly, is childhood violence. The source mentions a kind of double bind here, which is quite disturbing. It is. There are a couple of paths. If the father is the one being violent, the son might later resent the mother for not protecting him, even if she couldn't possibly have stopped it.
A feeling of betrayal.
Exactly. Or if the mother is the one inflicting violence, well, that's a much more direct negative experience shaping his early views of women.
And this connects back to the global picture the researcher paints. It's not just isolated families.
Right. Think about corporal punishment laws. As of 2025, the source says something like 2/3 of the world hasn't banned it. In cultures where child rearing falls almost entirely on mothers, maybe unsupported, well, physical punishment might be the only power they feel they have.
Which is tragic in itself.
It is. And ironically, this dynamic can feed into later discrimination against women because the sons associate women, their mothers, with pain or arbitrary rule.
And it's not just home, is it? Schools, too.
Yeah, institutional violence is a factor. Corporal punishment is still allowed in schools, even kindergartens in lots of places, including some U.S. states. Imagine a young boy experiencing what feels like unfair physical discipline from a female teacher. That can just reinforce the risk, planting another seed. So you've got this potential foundation of insecurity or resentment. Then what happens within the family dynamic as the boy grows? The absent father figure comes up a lot.
And that's not just physical absence, like through divorce.
No, it can be emotional distance, too. Fathers who are there physically but just don't know how to connect. They're unsure how to interact empathetically with their sons.
What's the fallout from that?
It's huge. Boys lack a positive male role model for empathy. They don't see what a loving, supportive partnership between a man and woman actually looks like day to day, so they look elsewhere.
Media. Sports heroes.
Yeah.
Social media.
Exactly. And those often push very narrow, sometimes pretty aggressive ideas of what it means to be a man. It's often easier to copy that than learn real emotional skills.
And if the father is around but is actively negative about women?
Well, if he's using slurs, constantly complaining about the women, the son might just soak that up, especially if there's no counter-influence.
Okay, so that's the absent or toxic father. But the flip side is the mother who is perhaps too present, especially if the father isn't in the picture.
This is a really nuanced point the source makes carefully.
Because it sounds like blaming the mother, which we said isn't the goal.
Right. And the research emphasizes this over-mothering often happens because the father left a vacuum. She's trying to compensate. But the risk of misogynization goes up if that mother becomes over-controlling with her teenage son. Maybe he shares adult problems he can't handle, or this is difficult, demands physical affection beyond what's appropriate for his age because she needs tenderness.
Wow. So her own needs, potentially driven by the father's absence, end up creating a different kind of problem for the son's view of women.
It can, yes. It can create new attachment issues or resentments. And we shouldn't forget siblings either. Constant fights with a sister, feeling like parents favored her, later conflicts over inheritance or caring for parents. Those can plant negative seeds too, which are then easy to generalize.
Okay, so moving out from the family, the wider world starts to play a role. School seems like a big one.
Definitely. We mentioned female teachers earlier, but think about conflicts. Feeling unfairly graded, constantly criticized, maybe just feeling totally misunderstood by a female authority figure. These can become little building blocks for that generalized negativity.
And interactions with peers, girl cliques.
Getting bullied or ridiculed by girls, or just navigating that competitive atmosphere. It can be tough. And then you have male peer groups.
The masculine posturing.
Exactly. Lots of negative talk about girls, sexualized insults. It's often a way to fit in. And if a young guy already has low self-confidence, maybe linked back to that insecure attachment we talked about, he's really susceptible, he might just adopt the group's negative view to seem cool.
Then comes the minefield of first relationships, rejection.
A key trigger, the source says, being turned down repeatedly, or maybe worse, being cheated on by a first serious girlfriend. Those wounds can go incredibly deep.
Feeding that narrative of women can't be trusted or women are impossible.
And this is where that irrational leap really takes hold. A man has to somehow resist blaming all women for his personal failures in romance. Often it's about mismatched expectations, different life goals, or maybe even his own lack of communication skills. Perhaps skills lost to too much time on games or phones instead of real interaction.
That leads us to a really significant modern factor the source highlights. Pornography.
Yes, this is a huge one, especially the easily accessible online stuff. It paints this completely false, often degrading picture of sex, purely focused on male pleasure.
Which is incredibly damaging for young people trying to figure things out.
Totally. It sets up these completely unrealistic expectations about partners, about sex itself, that leads to disappointment, frustration, which feeds right back into the misogyny cycle.
And it doesn't stop being a problem in adulthood.
In a way. The source points out that regular viewing can normalize demeaning acts, internalize really ugly language used in titles, slut, whore. Those words become part of the emotional landscape. It's almost like an economic good. You see it, you want to own or experience it, viewing women as objects to consume, not partners. It's a powerful, modern reinforcer of older wounds.
Okay, so we've got the childhood foundations, relationship difficulties, digital influences. But life keeps throwing challenges, right? Even in adulthood, like at work.
Yeah, and while we know women face far more workplace discrimination overall, the source does acknowledge it can go the other way. A man having really negative experiences with female colleagues, maybe gossip, sabotage, bullying, or a female boss feeling unrecognized, denied promotions, constantly criticized.
That can flip the script from personally, make him feel he's the disadvantaged one.
Exactly. It fuels personal resentment that's then, again, easily generalized.
And then, what the source calls potentially the biggest tipping point for adult men, marriage problems and divorce.
Yeah, this is often where things reach a crisis. Ongoing issues in marriage, constant arguments, feeling unseen, sexual rejection, losing shared interests that builds chronic frustration. But divorce, that's often the traumatic peak.
Especially if there's betrayal involved.
Right. And then the practical fallout, fights over money, alimony feeling like a huge burden. But the source identifies the deepest wound often as when a loving, involved father loses regular contact with his kids. Custody battles can be brutal.
The loss of access, loss of a role.
It's incredibly traumatizing for many men, and that intense personal pain multiplied across many individuals is likely part of what drags down those national happiness and peace scores we mentioned earlier.
So the critical self-reflection piece here is, a man has to ask, has the trauma of my divorce made me hate all women? Or can I keep it focused on the specific breakdown of this one relationship?
That's the vital question. And we also have to layer in cultural and religious context.
In less secular societies, religion often plays a role in defining gender roles.
Very much so. Religions might explicitly restrict women's rights, teaching men from childhood that women are somehow lesser or need controlling.
But there's a strange twist with migration.
Yeah, it's fascinating. A man moves from a very religious, restrictive background to a more secular, liberal society. He might see the freedom women have there, especially sexual freedom, and deeply resent it. He might label it unchaste, partly because of his upbringing, but maybe also partly because he desires it but feels conflicted or unable to access it. That internal conflict can really fuel anger towards women.
Okay, finally, the source looks at a specific group. Older single men, say 50 plus.
Right. This is a demographic facing unique challenges. Many haven't fully grasped how much things have changed due to equality. Women are often financially independent now, highly educated, self-confident, with strong friend networks. They don't need a man in the same way for survival or status.
While some men in that age group might still have outdated expectations.
Sometimes, yeah. Maybe still looking for younger partners to fit older roles, maybe not having a realistic view of their own attractiveness or social skills. They might not get honest feedback, which just leads to more frustration, feeling isolated, and sometimes sliding into a kind of anti-feminism, blaming women for their lack of relationship success.
Which ties into two deeper issues you mentioned, loneliness and this. Sin cries.
Exactly. Loneliness is a massive issue. Men often struggle to build close male friendships, seeing other men as competitors. That isolation can really warp social and political views, making them look for scapegoats, politicians, immigrants, or the women to blame for their general life disappointment.
And the sin cries, the crisis of meaning. Tell us more about that.
It's basically an existential vacuum, like Viktor Frankl talked about. An inner emptiness. Frankl argued we find meaning through dedicating ourselves to a task, through love, through experiencing beauty, often through contributing something helpful to others. If a man is just chronically negative, lacks passion, feels empty, he has to ask, are women just a convenient target for this huge void inside me that I don't know how to fill?
That's a lot to consider. It paints a really complex picture. What really stands out is the underlying idea that behind the anger, the hate, there's often sadness. Grief.
Yeah, repressed grief or sorrow, and maybe hating what you secretly desire but feel you can't have, whether that's partnership success or even just, enjoying life in a way you were taught wasn't allowed.
So the core message seems to be look inward.
Absolutely. The research gives this long list of potential biographical factors: insecure attachment, absent fathers, porn, loneliness, workplace conflicts, divorce trauma. A man really needs to examine his own story to stop unfairly generalizing his pain onto all women. That self-reflection is non-negotiable.
Okay, so acknowledging all this complexity, what can actually be done? How do you even start a constructive conversation when views are so polarized? The researchers suggested a specific tool, didn't they? The empathy circle.
Yes, and it's powerful because the initial goal isn't agreement, it's just being heard.
How does it work?
It's simple, really. Two people. One speaks for a short time. The other person, the listener, has one job. Repeat back what they heard. Not interpret, not argue, just reflect. So, I heard you say.
Until the speaker feels understood.
Exactly. The speaker confirms, yes, that's it. Or corrects, well, almost, but you missed this part. The listener tries again until the speaker says, yes, you've got it. I feel heard. Then they swap roles.
So if I was reflecting, I might say, okay, I hear that the hardest part of the divorce wasn't losing your wife, but losing daily contact with your kids.
Perfect. And the other person confirms or clarifies. It takes maybe 15 minutes each. And even if opinions don't change right away, just the act of feeling truly listened to, truly seen, which, as we've discussed, is often missing, can diffuse so much of that generalized anger. It creates space for reflection.
That sounds potentially really helpful. Beyond that specific tool, the source also points towards positive movements.
Yeah, exploring positive masculinity groups, things like He4Sha, White Ribbon, Equimundo groups that focus on nonviolence, equality, engaged fatherhood.
And understanding masculinity itself differently.
Yes. Researching the concept of masculinities plural. Realizing that ideals of strength, success, what it means to be a man, they vary hugely across cultures and time. There isn't just one right way. Understanding that can take immense pressure off men who feel trapped by a single, often toxic, definition.
It's fascinating how this all loops back to where we started, that link between gender equality and happier, more peaceful societies. The stakes are incredibly high, both personally and globally.
They really are. Which leads us to the final, maybe provocative thought the research leaves us with.
Yeah.
If we know statistically that gender equality correlates so strongly with peace and well-being for everyone, what deep-seated fears, maybe those old biographical wounds, right back to childhood attachment, what fears are really holding back the men who still fight so hard against it?
Definitely food for thought. Thank you for joining us for the deep dive.